Okay guys, if you are an independent contractor, freelancer, you have some kind of side hustle, I have news that should concern you. And if you're just somebody who generally cares about the economy and the availability of good jobs, this news should concern you too. So, the Biden administration's Labor Department just announced a new proposal this week that is high-key alarming, and I'm going to fill you in on it, but before I do that, I need to give you the backstory, because this is actually the accumulation of efforts that have been going on for over 2 years now to basically take out the gig economy. So I want to walk you through what's been going on, why they're taking this course of action, how it's going to be implemented, and why they're doing it. So, let's go back to the beginning. Basically, over the past decade or so, maybe a little bit more, 28 states have passed what's known as right-to-work laws. And essentially what this says is that unions can't force you to join them, right? If you want to join them, go ahead. It's your right to join them if you want to, but they can't make you. And that's actually a really big deal because from FDR in the 1930s on, that's mostly how unions have become really powerful, is the government basically backed them and helped them force people into membership.
I'm sorry, I don't have a choice.
In 28 states, they can no longer do that.
You can't do that. You can't do that to friends. You can't do that.
On top of that, there was a really important U.S. Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago. It was known as the Janus case. And basically in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that unions also cannot force government employees to pay dues to them. So both the private union sector and the public union sector have taken pretty hard hits since they can no longer force people to join them. Turns out, most people don't want to. Their membership is at record lows. So that spells really bad news for unions because they're bleeding power and money and membership. It also spells really bad news for the Democratic Party because traditionally unions have given a vast amount of money to Democratic politicians. Ipso facto, we see a number of current Democratic politicians basically going to war on work on behalf of the unions. What they're trying to do is pass laws that either undermine or override right-to-work laws, and they're also trying to go after the gig economy because so many workers have left old school 9-to-5 desk jobs, right? Intentionally. I'm one of them. People don't want to work like this anymore. And increasingly, they don't have to because there's so many new kinds of jobs creeping up online and in what's known as the gig economy. That means that people can have more flexibility. They can set their own hours. They often can pursue their passions. They can build their own companies. And a lot of the time, they also make more money. But what's significant about this when it comes to unions and the Democrats is that when you're a gig worker and you work for yourself, unions definitely can't force you into membership because you're not in an office setting where they can actually get a hold of your money. So because of that, we first saw California pass this law back in 2019, 2020 called AB 5. And basically what it did is it came in and it restructured who can be classified as a gig worker, who can have an independent contract.
I don't know who you are or where you came from. From now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
And it essentially said that if you're doing a job, if you're working as an independent contractor, and you're doing a job for a company where the job actually entails the company's mission. So let's say you are Vox Magazine and you employ a lot of freelance writers. Since Vox's main mission is to produce articles and content, those independent contractors are doing work that is within line of the company's mission. This law basically said you can't do that. Those people have to be full-time employees. So what happened? Within a couple months, a whole bunch of people lost their jobs in California. We saw it especially impact not only writers, but musicians, people who perform comedy, all kinds of people in the art sector. And so there was significant backlash because one, nobody was asking for this except for the unions. And two, obviously companies don't just all of a sudden have funds to hire all independent contractors full time. It's a lot more expensive to have a full-time employee. And so what happened is people just lost their jobs and then they had to go find old school 9-to-5 jobs elsewhere. So it was bad for everybody.
I knew this was gonna be terrible. And you know what? It came out even worse than I thought.
So bad, in fact, that voters actually rallied behind a proposition to overturn that law. That's been tied up in courts. But just know it was a catastrophe immediately. Has that stopped unions and Democrats? Not one bit. In fact, from that point on, at the national level, Democrats started trying to take AB 5 and pass it through Congress. It was called the PRO Act. It was basically the exact same law, but at the national level. And what it would do is basically say, it would get rid of right-to-work laws, and it would also say that most people could not be classified as independent contractors. Fortunately, they failed to get it through. They then tried to tack it on to Build Back Better. That version failed to get through thanks to Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. And basically they've given up passing it through Congress because, again, this is not popular. People do not want it. But instead, what the Biden administration is now doing is trying to use unelected bureaucrats and agencies and executive orders and rulemaking to come in and implement this through a back door. And that's why you should be concerned.
Should we be concerned here?
Because this proposal the Labor Department just announced is essentially going to be AB 5 that they're going to start trying to use to classify who can file taxes as an independent contractor or freelancer. That means they're coming for your jobs. So you need to be concerned about this. I think it's highly corrupt. It benefits nobody but the unions. And again, it would demolish so much progress that we have made as workers in the past decade. We don't want this. If people want to be full-time employees, it's not rocket science. You can go get a job as a full-time employee. People who are freelancing, they expressly do not want to be full-time employees. They want to be independent. They don't want to be within these company structures. And as a whole, this would lead to less flexibility, less autonomy, less ability to pursue one's passions. It would also hurt the economy because you would have fewer companies created. You'd have companies having to use their resources less efficiently because they'd have to hire everybody's full-time employees when not all jobs require a full-time 40-hour-a-week employee. And so it's really kind of ghastly to me that they're doing this on an individual level, but also it is shocking to me that on the brink of a recession, when we've never needed economic growth and for the government to get off our backs more, they're instead going in this direction. And I think that tells you exactly who they work for. So you can read more at base-politics.com. I covered this in an article there, but keep your eye on this. It's going to be a very big deal.